So Mimi Pond, this lady right here, is a lifelong cartoonist with one graphic biography, which do admit, the Mitford Sisters and Me, 2 graphic novels, Over Easy and The Customer is Always Wrong, which you can see here, and countless comics for websites and publications, too numerous to mention, but I think it was 17 in the Los Angeles Times. Definitely featured your work regularly.
Village Voice.
Village Voice.
Adweek. Lots of magazines.
Lots of magazines.
Back when print was a thing, remember, folks?
Yeah. And she's produced 5 humor books in the 1980s and 1990s, including The Valley Girl's Guide to Life, which was a huge hit. And after the publication of her book, Shoes Never Lie, the Boston Globe described her as, quote, perhaps the leading authority on the spiritual, emotional, and visceral connection between women and shoes. And as someone who owns 75 pairs of shoes, I had to include that quote. She really has had a career of putting women and women's interests into her cartoons, comics, and writing. So, first, I meant to actually show you all these books as I was talking about them. Here's Valley Girls, Secrets of the Powder Room, which I lost my copy somehow. Shoes Never Lie, A Groom of One's Own, Splitting Hairs. And then Over Easy and The Customer's Always Wrong, and I brought copies of all except for one that you're welcome to look at later. But first we're going to talk about her newest book, The Mitford Sisters and Me. And to get the first question out of the way, I want to hear about how did you come to the Mitford Sisters, and what was the process of starting the book, and if you could explain the phrase "do admit," I would also appreciate that.
The Mitford Sisters were 6 English aristocratic sisters born in the rural English countryside between 1904 and 1920, and their parents they didn't go to school. They were educated at home by a series of governesses, and they were kind of growing up in this kind of hothouse environment. And eldest sister Nancy was a brilliant wit and kind of led the charge and just raised the bar for anything funny. You had to get up to that level. And they fought all the time, and when they would fight, they would say, "Oh, do admit." Admit I'm right. And I love that because I grew up with 2 brothers and I never had any sisters, so of course I desperately wanted sisters. And my brothers would never admit anything I said was right. So, and my Jessica Mitford, who was the second youngest, wrote a best-selling expose of the American funeral industry in 1963. I mean, blockbuster bestseller, and the consequences you will read about in the book involving John F. Kennedy. She wrote this expose of the funeral industry that was not only scathing, but also hilarious. And my parents read it, and they just couldn't stop talking about her. I mean, she just became part of their whole DNA. And when I got a little older, I read it myself and agreed it was really funny. And then I was really interested in her, and it wasn't until I was at a party in New York in the 80s, and someone said to me, she's got sisters. And I was like, what? And then I started reading about Nancy, and who wrote, she wrote The Pursuit of Love and Love in a Cold Climate, which are 2 comic novels that have never been out of print. And she wrote biographies of people like Frederick the Great and Louis XIV, and a book called Voltaire and Love. And she's just very, very funny. And I just dived in and went down this rabbit hole, and I just started reading more and more and more. And it got to the point it was threatening my marriage, because at dinner parties I would start talking about them and I couldn't stop, and my husband's kicking me under the table and he's like, shut up, shut up, shut up. And I went to a wonderful Biographers International Conference in DC in June, and I was so relieved to finally meet other people who are as obsessed with their topics as I was with mine.
Well, it's paid off in this beautiful book. Now, I'm a historian, and I feel like you've done a really, really great job, not just researching the Mitford Sisters, but all the events surrounding them. I wanted to know more, if you could tell more about the research process.
Well,
for this
I went
book.
to art school, which was like, yay, no humanities, no science, no history. Whoop, whoop-de-doo. So I was like really light on my history studies, although my father was a complete fetishistic World War II hobbyist, like most men between like 50 and 90.
Yeah.
Really. I started reading about all the events of the I learned everything about the 20th century through researching these sisters. So now I just know so much more about them.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Eric Larson is a history writer. He also wrote the wonderful book, The Devil in the White City, about a serial killer in Chicago at the time of the World's Fair there. But he's written 2 wonderful books called The Splendid and the Vile, and that's about Hitler and Churchill, and a great one called In the Garden of Beasts, about Berlin in the 30s and how the American ambassador kept trying to tell Roosevelt and his cabinet, yeah, you got to see what's happening here, it's really bad. And they're like, oh, well, you're from the Midwest, we don't have to pay attention to you, we're East Coast elites.
Yeah.
And like they weren't listening, and it's a great account of, how the Nazis were just building up and building up and building up. So those were some terrific books to read about it. There's also a book about the history of the English aristocracy. That was like the rise and fall of the English aristocracy, and and I'm like, first of all, I'm like staggered by the whole idea of the aristocracy. I'm like, you convinced 90% of the population that you're superior to them. You get to own all the land and they get 1% of the land. How do you do that? How do you get away with that for like 400 years?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And people are obsessed with that stuff, like the shows like Downton Abbey. Like people are just like really into it.
Yeah. I mean, and it's I call it like middle-aged lady porn.
Yeah, that's so true.
Because you're like, oh yeah, I'd like to have the maid come in our room and start the fire and hand me an ironed newspaper and a tea on a tray, and there's a little toast in the little racks. I'd like that.
And like looking beautiful all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, you're beautiful.
And then you start thinking like all of that is built on colonialism and slavery, and you're like
maybe not.
It takes the fun away.
Being self-aware is hard. Now, so you're not just writing the history, but you're also drawing it. Can you walk us through a bit of a process of how you would choose to depict this history on the page, such as this one?
Well, I mean, most graphic biographies tend to be, I'm sorry to say, nothing but talking heads. Yap, 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 this head over here, head over here, 2 word balloons, and I wanted to avoid that at all costs, so I wanted it to have like graphic punch. So I have Pinterest has become my very best friend in the whole wide world, because Pinterest is just nothing more than a digital bulletin board where you can organize images however you want for whatever project you're working for. So it's not like just for women planning their bridal showers. It's for anyone who needs a place to store images and be able to look through them. And on top of that, Pinterest the algorithm starts to know what you like. So then when you just go to their main page and you're just like idly scrolling because you have no ideas, you're like, oh, I like that, I'll save that. Oh, maybe I can use that. So it's just brilliant for that. So I was just looking for any way I could to get ideas across that weren't just people yapping. So this image is about the Battle of Cable Street, which was in 1936, when Oswald Mosley, who had just the day before married Diana Mitford in Joseph Goebbels' living room in Berlin, decided to march through the streets of East London through the Jewish ghetto to like get their ideas of racial superiority and all that across, and the neighborhood wasn't having it, and it was like thousands and thousands of people turned out to protest and battle the British Union of Fascists and the police that came. And after that, they passed a law saying that Mosley wasn't allowed to speak in public, and he was too dangerous and too divisive.
Yeah, Mosley's journey in your book is quite something.
Oh, he was vile.
Yeah.
And he and Diana became the most hated couple in Britain.
They did, and it's a really fascinating part of the story. And I told Mimi yesterday that reading her graphic work was kind of like the experience of looking at a Richard Scarry book when I was little, where you just kind of want to take your time absorbing all the cool little details, because her page layouts are so varied and so beautiful throughout this book. And then on a similar vein, I'm obviously obsessed with your inking, and I wondered if you could talk about why you chose blue for this book and the process of inking.
Well, color is nothing but an emotional choice ever, and it just seemed right. And I found this wonderful Daler-Rowney Prussian blue acrylic ink that just produces the most varied tones. It just seems kind of almost endless in a way. And it was really easy to work with and really fluid. I highly recommend it. They're black. Acrylic ink is like super smooth.
What type of paper did you use?
Arch's 90-pound watercolor paper, and it's really great because it's really tough. You can beat the shit out of it.
It's cold. Is it cold press or hot cold press? Smooth.
No, the hot press is the smooth one.
Yeah, the hot press is smooth.
And I was using cold press, I think, because it had more texture.
Yeah.
Or it made it trickier for lettering.
But it came across beautifully.
Thanks.
And then if anyone has read any of your previous graphic novels or other work, they know that one of your gifts as a graphic storyteller is capturing personality. And I wanted to hear more about what it was like capturing and juggling the strong and varied personalities of the Mitford sisters throughout this book.
Well, because I'd read so many books that they themselves had written, and also their letters to each other, which is a great collection of, it gives you, I just love reading collected letters, because it gives you such a way into understanding the way people communicated with each other on an intimate level. And so you get you start to develop an ear for the way they sound through them writing to each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, they're each very distinctive personalities.
And you took such care weaving their stories together and choosing which sister to spend time on where throughout the book. It's really quite something. And then, do you have a favorite Mitford sister?
Of course,
why?
Jessica.
Jessica.
Because she really bucked the trend. She turned her back on being an aristocrat,
yes,
on living that lifestyle, and she came to America, and she became essentially very American. Mm-hmm. I mean, she embraced democracy. She went to the 1940 Democratic Convention in Texas, where Lyndon Johnson, she met Lyndon Johnson among other people. I mean, she just knew everyone. Her letter, and her collection of letters, which has just been re-released as a paperback, is really fun. I mean, she became best friends in the world with Maya Angelou, among other people, but also, I mean, it's like reading her letters to and from people is like a who's who of American life. They're just amazing. And she was a civil rights and union rights activist in the 50s, along with her husband Bob Truhaft, and she would front for black families trying to buy houses in white neighborhoods there. And her daughter Dinky told me that she went to her 50th high school reunion at Oakland Tech High School, and a man approached her, and she didn't remember him. She said, "Your mother changed my life. He changed our whole family's life." And she did that over and over and over again. And she went to Laurel, Mississippi, drove with 3 other women to Laurel, Mississippi, to go door to door to beg people to sign a petition to overthrow the wrongful conviction of a black man accused of rape, who was going to be executed. And it was unfortunately, she even talked to William Faulkner, and she is down there. That's in the book too, and that exchange is super bizarre. And sadly, the man was executed in the town square in Laurel, Mississippi, by a traveling electric chair operated by a former carny. And you're just like, chilling. And so, she just worked tirelessly for civil rights through the 50s, and then, became a muckraking journalist, campaigning so that people didn't get taken advantage of by the funeral industry. And she did another book called The American Way of Birth, where she was way ahead of her time in examining how hospitals and big pharma and the medical industry take complete advantage of women, years before anyone else was addressing that topic.
Yeah. And it's similar, were any of the sisters more difficult for you to spend time with and write about?
Well, Diana, yeah, I mean, she's so vile.
Yes, yes.
And it's difficult to, because she was a diehard fascist until the end of her life. And there's if you're interested, if you go on YouTube and Google Diana Mitford or Diana Mosley, there's an interview from the 80s that pops up. She's in her 80s. She's still stunningly gorgeous. I mean, she looked like the actress Carol Lombard. I mean, she's just like, and still at that age, still stunning. And the interviewer is saying to her, like, well, what about Hitler anyway? And she's like, well, you couldn't help but admire him.
Oh.
And in this voice, this accent, it's so aristocratic. They say the Queen has the most aristocratic accent. She made the Queen sound like Dolly Parton. In fact, they all had that accent. And Nancy was doing war work in London during the Blitz. She was a fire watcher, and they had her leading lectures to teach new volunteers how to do it. And after a couple of times they said, you don't have to do that anymore. It's like, really, why? It's like, they want to put you on the fire.
Yeah. I love the pages where you drew the fire. So
Yeah.
That was they're really beautiful.
Yeah, and then Diana also, when asked about the Holocaust, like, well, 6 million, that seems like too many, really, don't you think? And you're just like, ah!
Mm-hmm. You deal with it really well in the book where there's a...
I'm sorry to interrupt. No, the thing about her is that the way they've been written about in the past, all these other books, they just give her a pass.
Yeah, you mentioned that
over
in the
and
book,
over and over, and you're like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah.
She's a monster.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's a very charming, beautiful monster.
Yeah,
And then Unity, who was even more like
that one made me
weirdly
sad.
best friends with Hitler.
Yeah.
I had not a sexual relationship, but just this. It's like they were each other's imaginary friends. And she and he met, like, according to her diary, something like 190 times.
Yeah.
And there was something wrong with Unity. And she could not cope with the idea that Britain had declared war on Germany. And she went to a park in Munich and she got out her little pistol and she shot herself in the head. But she only incurred brain damage. And so she lived for another 8 years, reduced to the mental age of 12. And her mother cared for her, and her father had, like, she and Diana had, like, introduced her parents to Hitler, and for a while they're like standard issue aristocrats. Well, this fellow Hitler seems to have some sensible ideas. Also, in the 30s, fascism did not have the onus on it that it has now. It was a new idea, and the aristocrats were all terrified of communists because look what the communists had done to the royal family's cousins in Russia. They were coming for you. They were coming for us. So that was like the worst thing possible, which made Jessica's decision to become a communist at age 12 really not go down well with her family.
Yeah, I love when you capture the two sides of the fascist sister and the communist sister.
Yeah, they shared a room, and it was like there was a line down the middle, and on one side there's like pictures of Hitler, on the other side there's swastikas, and on the other side there's all this communist propaganda.
It was really a good part, like every part of your book, but that was a good part of your book. And it's not just called The Mitford Sisters, it's called The Mitford Sisters and Me, and you put yourself in this book. And I wanted to know if you could describe how you came through this process to grasp your relationship and how with the material.
Well, I mean, I was trying to relate to Diana at that point because all of them, they were told by their father, there's no money for you. There was one son born after Nancy, Tom Mitford, who sadly died in World War II. And as the brother of 6 opinionated sisters, what would you do? You would agree with whatever sister you were with. And anyway, so they were told by their father, there's no money for you, so they're all planning their exit strategies. What am I going to do? How am I going to get through this life? And Diana married beer air Brian Guinness at 18 just to get out of the house. And she, at the time, she said, I felt like there wasn't anything I did particularly well. And I think as teenagers, like, pre-teenagers have a lot more confidence, but as a teenage girl, all of a sudden you're told by society who you should be and how you should act and how you should dress and how you should be a woman. And it's like, it just like destroys any sense of confidence you once had about who you think you are. Mm-hmm. And it's a really hard thing to navigate being a teenager. So I was like trying to relate to her and understand, like, because that same thing happened to me. I had a high school boyfriend who he had my whole life planned out for me. Mm-hmm. I was going to go to UCLA with him. Mm-hmm. We were going to get married. He was going to get his PhD. I was going to have all these kids for him. And I was like, I don't think I want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And luckily I had enough confidence to like break free of that. But I think she drank the Kool-Aid. She like at 16, like men are just falling all over themselves over her. Mm-hmm. And she like realized the power of being the great beauty. And she just went with that.
Yeah.
And she's like, I will just be, I will be whatever you want me to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And she really did do that. And then I put this in just because I love these 2 pages. I love what you've done with them. I think they're beautiful. I think they capture the stories very well.
Jessica Mitford ran away. She had started a running away account when she was 12 years old, and she told everyone, I'm doing it, I'm running away, watch me. And she had a cousin named Esmond Romilly who was the bad boy. He started essentially the 1930s version of an underground newspaper at his private school that was distributed through other boys' private schools in England, like exposing the horrors of English boys' boarding schools at a time when nobody was doing that. And then got it published as a book when he was like about 16. He's like this wonder kid, like complete rebel. Like he's so radical, he's like communism isn't even good enough for him. Mm. And she's following him in the press because he's being covered, because he's Winston Churchill's nephew. Yeah. And so he and all the aristocrats' lives were like an ongoing reality show covered by the press as though they were reality show celebrities.
Yes.
And she's like, I got to meet this guy. And she, in fact, met him at a weekend house party at yet another cousin's house. And, well, the story's in the book, but they get together and they run away to Spain. He has just come back from fighting in the Spanish Civil War at like 18 years old, and is like part of a battalion that of like 45 of them, there were like 6 of them left at the end. Yeah. And he was invalided back with dysentery and was recovering when she met him. And she said, are you going back to Spain? And he said, yeah. She said, can I come with you? Yeah. And he said, she says, I've got 500 pounds. He said, okay.
Yeah, that was one of the favorite parts of the book for me. I love that part of the story.
So, of course, they fell in love. Yeah. And they got married. And he was like 18 years old. Mm-hmm. And this is illustrating the fact that young people's brains don't really fully develop until they're in their mid-20s, but especially boys. Yes. So his judgment is like, so-so, and they visit a casino and lose all their money. He's sure they're going to turn into $1 million, and so they go back to London, and then they wind up moving to this ghetto, and they both get jobs, and they're working away.
And then we have this page, which I love how you depicted I love how you depict the passing of time in your book. Yeah. Do you want to speak to that or?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was like trying to condense, because it's so much information. Mm-hmm. You got 6 sisters. What's going on with all of them? So you got like a little bit of what's going on with each of them, and and just trying to jam that information in there without wearing you out. Yeah,
and every once in a while you have like a page that has the date and an update for each sister.
Yeah, so I just kind of went chronologically. I also went, I was trying to pay attention, tracking whose sister's drama was at the forefront at that particular time, and emphasizing that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. And then I like this page a lot,
Thanks.
Yeah,
I like
I like it because it shows the darker blue as well.
They were not, Esmond and Jessica were not above using their connections through their backgrounds to get ahead. They became essentially very American in that they hustled. They had to work a bunch of shitty jobs, but they had a connection to Eugene Meyer, who was the head of the Fed and the owner of the Washington Post, and they became friends with him. He gave Esmond writing assignments like, aristocrats on the loose in America kind of stuff. And Jessica became lifelong friends with Katharine Graham, his daughter.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Like I said, they all knew everyone.
Yeah.
So they used what they could, and they did what they needed.
Yeah, they knew. And then another thing I love about this book is that you really capture the difficulties of just being a woman and having a reproductive body.
Yeah.
And I love that you put reproductive organs on your page. Yeah. And do you want to talk about that aspect of the book?
Yeah. Again, I was just looking for some different way to portray it, and I never dreamed in my life I'd draw a uterus as a character, but here you have it. Nancy had female trouble, and her husband, who she married literally to get out of the house. She was 29, and it was like not in those days in that position. Not having a husband is like not having shoes. You just had to have them. It was just a thing. And she was on the rebound from a 5-year relationship with a man who everyone else knew was gay.
Yes.
And he dumped her, and a week later she met this guy Peter Rod at a cocktail party, and he was drunk, and he had been proposing marriage to like 3 other women that night, and he proposed to her, and she said, yeah. Yeah. And he turned out to be like a crashing bore, and just a pain in the ass, not a good husband. But then he went off to war, and she's in London, and she gets to know all the, so de Gaulle rolls in, the Free French roll in, and de Gaulle had been, in the French army, and when the French caved to the Germans, this is something I grew up with headlines about de Gaulle because his career extended into the 1960s. But I didn't really know anything about him, and to learn that de Gaulle is this French general who defects from the French powers under the Germans and comes to London and comes to Churchill and says, "I'm France, talk to me." I'm like, the balls! Yeah. It's fabulous. And so all the Free French fighters were in London, and they were depending on the Brits to give them money so that they could fight against the Germans. And so all these Free Frenchmen are hanging around London, and Nancy's getting to know them, and they're like so much more charming and interesting than the Englishmen. And she has a dalliance with a Frenchman that leads to a pregnancy that winds. It was an ectopic pregnancy. I'm not sure.
I think so. I think one of them definitely had an ectopic pregnancy.
Yes, that was her. And she wound up having to go to a clinic and have a hysterectomy. So that's what that page is about.
Yes.
And then even Debo got pregnant a number of times. The youngest, who was married to the younger son of the Duke of Devonshire. And she had I don't know, I've forgotten how many pregnancies she had where she miscarried that were very painful. And this doctor who was the royal family's doctor, they were just horrible to her.
Oh yeah, they were. That page made me, filled me with rage. Okay, so we are at 4:04. We have about 10 more minutes, so I'm gonna open to questions.
Okay.
And so I wanted to show this page, because it's towards the end of the book, and it captures, I think, a lot about how Mimi relates to the women she is writing about.
Yeah, I mean, you're told. I mean, I was born in 1956, so childhood through the 60s, and you just get this I wanted to be an artist, but there's no women artists. There's no women artists in museums. I guess we just weren't good enough. This is what you think. This is what you're told. you know, and you just absorb this, you internalize this information that you're a second-class citizen. You're just not quite as good. You're never going to make it. A teacher was telling us, like, anyone in the U.S. can become president one day. I'm like, could I be president? Well, no, but you could help a man be president. I was like, that shit.
Yeah, you can
Like,
help
this
a man
was
do
like
anything.
this is the water we swam in.
Yeah.
You know, and if I'd known there were these women out there doing these things behind the scenes, because they had it even worse than I did, even.
Yeah.
But they found a way to make differences for better and for worse.
Exactly. And then, of course, we have to talk about how the process of making this book, everything relates to this book. Okay, so, and I saw an interview that you did in 2014 for the Comics Journal where you talked about how when you were doing, I believe it was Over Easy, it was sort of in isolation and you weren't able to share a lot of your work.
Yeah.
But in this book, I know that you were sharing, because I saw them, pages from the book.
Because Drone and Quarterly wanted me to separate the art, the line from the tone, because like in traditional printing processes, it prints sharper if you have them on two separate images and then you put them together. I don't think that's true anymore, because this time I just put my foot down and I said, I'm not doing that again. I would have to like draw the line drawings and then go into a dark room with a light board, tape a piece of watercolor paper over it in the dark and start putting in the tone and just go, I think it's going to work, I don't know. And so the two separate images, so I couldn't really share them on social media. So I was like working under a rock.
Yeah. And sharing this time around, well, the audience I really enjoyed seeing your work. Was it nice for you to be?
Oh, it was great. It was like having a cheering session. It really kept me going. I'm really grateful to all my followers.
We were all very excited. And then this book obviously draws off of your life. How is making this book, which draws very much more directly from your life, compared to making this book about the Mitford Sisters?
It's totally different. I had written it initially as a conventional piece of fiction because, like, I woke up in the mid-1990s and I had 2 children and my career was gone. I mean, print was dead. I wasn't getting any assignments. It was all about the internet, and nobody wanted to pay for content, and I couldn't get arrested. And I had this story lodged inside me since the first day I went to work at this restaurant. And I said, I've got to get cracking on this. And so at the time, I was feeling very discouraged about making comics in general. And I was just like, well, I'll just write it as a conventional piece of fiction. And then, of course, my agent couldn't even sell that. And I was like, finally had to break down and go, I'm a cartoonist. It's a graphic novel. Of course it is. So then I just began working on it. And it took a long time because my kids were still at home. So I was just work on it when I could, in between childcare.
Yeah, and it, of course, was hugely successful. People loved it. And then you followed it up with The Customer's Always Wrong, which was also great. And then because of time, I want to jump into some of your earlier works that were very great, but she just wrote a piece for People that connects the Mitford Sisters to Valley Girls.
Yes.
And I wanted to know if you could speak on that. Is this Valley Girls?
No.
No. This is the shoe one. I put the shoe one in because I love shoes. It's a great book about shoes. There we go.
Yeah. So in 1982, I moved to New York in January of 1982. I had I think I had $1,000 saved. And I had already been selling cartoons to the National Lampoon, so I had an in there, and I was starting to make, people were very generous in sharing connections. Like back then you would get an art director's name at a magazine, you would make an appointment, you would literally pound the pavement and go see them at these magazines, and you would show them your portfolio, and they would decide if they could use you. And so I was pounding the pavement, and I was very fortunate that the Village Voice had a wonderful, wonderful editor who became a great mentor, Mary Peacock, who did the V page, which was a style page. She basically just gave me a full page of the Village Voice to do cartoons on whatever I wanted to do, which is like having a full page ad for yourself in a major New York metropolitan newspaper. So an editor from Dell Books called me and took me to lunch, and they said, we want to do a humor book about Valley Girls. I said, what's that? He said, well, there's this new novelty song by Frank Zappa, and his daughter, 14-year-old daughter, Moon Unit Zappa, and and that's what it's about. So I had to buy the record. I didn't have a record player. Took it to a friend's house, listened to it once. I was like, yeah, I can do that. because I grew up, because I'd grown up in San Diego and I'd already been entertaining this editor with like my imitations of idiotic surfer dudes I went to high school with. It was like Spicoli before there was Spicoli. And I was like, hey, we really should go to the beach and get really high and like surf, and it'd be really awesome. I got some red mountain wine and some reds.
Yes.
It's gonna be great. And so I took my advance and I went back to LA, and I went to the Sherman Oaks Galleria. I saw these two 13-year-old girls on the escalator, and one of them said, you know what movie we should go see? What? We should go see Bambi. That is my favorite movie in the whole world. And so like I nabbed them, I took them to a food court, I bought them a Coke, and I like grilled them, wrote down everything, went to the beach, talked to other teenage girls, came back to New York, wrote it in 6 weeks.
Amazing.
And like I woke up and I'm on the bestseller list.
Yeah.
I had a 16-city book tour back then with limos and drivers and fancy hotels and room service and the Today Show and local talk shows and just everything, and it was all downhill from there. But I paid off my student loan.
That's amazing.
$5,000, people, $5,000.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Now, throughout your works, your many works, humor is obviously a mode of expression for you, and I wanted to know why humor? How did you come to humor?
I don't know. My family was always funny. I always loved laughing. I mean, my father put the Signet paperback collected EC Mad magazines in a little paperback in my hot little hands when I was 6 years old, and Harvey Kurtzman just blew my mind. And I was and my father loved comics, and he was like, so I was exposed to like New Yorker cartoon collections, to Little Abner, to Pogo, all these different collected comics, and he was like a frustrated cartoonist. He taught me how to draw, and it was like, well, she's going to be a cartoonist when she grows up. And I'm like, okay. And then I got to be like, about 18. I'm like, I'm going to be a cartoonist, and they're like, really? I said, you said. So.
That's funny. And then before we open it to the audience, can we talk about the shoe book? Can you explain the shoe book?
Well, I love shoes, and here's a bit of advice for you.
Yes.
If I had invested the money I spent on shoes in the 80s and put it into CDs, I'd be in a lot better shape now.
Yeah.
I still have the shoes. I can no longer wear them because between being old and like heels, no, and having 2 9-pound babies, my feet grew.
9 pounds.
Yes. So, and I still like them, but I can't. I'm not tempted anymore.
I
to
should
buy
stop
them.
at 75 pairs probably. Start putting in CDs.
Yeah, that would be my advice as a responsible adult to you.
You
My
will
fiance.
never stop buying shoes.
That was my friend. And then that we're gonna open it up to questions. We immediately have someone.
Great.
Yes.
Do you have any plans to republish your work from 17 Magazine, National Lampoon, any of your old magazines?
I mean, not yet, but that would be a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah. What's next?
I think a like autobio might be next.
That'd be great. I would
Yeah.
love to read that.
Because I put a lot of myself in this book, and people seem to really respond to it.
Yeah. Yeah. You do a really great job with that. Obviously. And another question, Ian.
I noticed that you, in your book on the Mitford Sisters, you go back and forth between what looks to be like your teenage self and your 11-year-old or younger version. What made you decide to use that plot device, just going back?
I was just trying to make it relatable, and what it felt like for me to be those ages and what it must have felt like for them to go through the same thing. I was trying desperately to find some sympathy for Diana, among other things.
Natalia, was that a hand? No. Back in the back.
I really have always admired your drawing. Your style is so funny.
Thank you.
And yet, you're also capable, without changing the style of being, I'm thinking of Laszlo. I won't say what it is, but what happens to Laszlo in Customer is Always Wrong is one of the most affecting things I've ever read in a graphic novel.
Oh, thank you.
And I just wonder, do you have a feeling when you're drawing something that's a little more serious that you feel yourself changing the drawing style?
I mean, you're trying to, when you're getting serious like that, you want it to really just convey a real punch, and to do it in the sparest way possible and not over-explain it, and you just go straight for the gut. There's a page in Do Admit, Jessica Mitford's first child died in a measles epidemic, and I was trying to imagine an image that would convey that kind of sense of loss and horror. And when we went through the 1993 earthquake in LA, and yeah, and we were in a small house, and it happened at like 4:30 in the morning or so, and it felt like when you're a kid and you're like got a refrigerator box and your friends are on the outside, you're in it and they're pushing it from the outside. That's what it felt like, being inside a box, just going like that. And I was like, our son, who wasn't even a year old, was, or maybe it was 94. He was either like a year and a half or less than a year old. Anyway, I was trying to get out of the bed and get to his room, and I couldn't even, like, I was having to hold on to the end of the bed because it was shaking so hard. And when I finally got to his room, which was, very close by, and I'm in his room, and I'm in the crib, it's completely pitch black, and I'm feeling, or I don't feel, he's like, I can't find him. He was curled up asleep in the corner.
Was this the Northridge earthquake you're talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah.
That was when I first moved to LA.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, and I just had that image of like an empty crib, and it stuck in me, so.
The reason why I didn't put it in here is it makes me cry looking in that
Yeah.
page, and it's like so, it's like not much detail, but it's so evocative.
Well, it's like that Hemingway short story.
Yes. Yes. Baby shoes.
Never Worn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Never. Yeah. That doesn't. That gets you. Do we have another question? Oh, yes. Back.
Just coming in a little late, but I have an interest in writing some political issue type.
Can you speak up a little? I'm sorry.
Yes, I want to get into some political pushback, and I'm worried now I need to learn what the repercussions of that could be legally,
I can't.
militarily.
Oh, he's saying he's trying to get into doing some stuff and like political stuff, and he's worried about pushback from that.
I don't really do political cartoons per se. I haven't heard of anyone giving me any political pushback on this, although it seems astonishing that that people think that fascism is a viable idea at this point. No one has, I haven't been challenged on that in the mainstream media by anyone, and happily, I'm too old for anyone to troll me. So I can't really answer that.
I just realized I never had you explain what Over Easy and the Customer Always Wrong is about. Would you mind giving a description?
About my lurid career as a waitress in Oakland in the late 1970s, in a diner where the manager was a former Latin scholar and poet who hired people not on the basis of their resume, but he would say, "Tell me a joke or a dream." So these are the people I'm working with, and it was the only restaurant I ever could have worked in. And whatever issues we had with customers, he always had our backs, and he always said the customer's always wrong.
Yeah, it's refreshing.
Yeah, so he was fabulous. He was like our groovy beatnik dad, and then he was about 10 to 15 years older than the rest of us, and we just worshipped him and thought he was great. And then I had my first child at 36, and I suddenly like the light bulb went off. I'm like, oh, he was out partying with us. He had children, but he was out with us.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was it was perfect, because I had gone from thinking of him as idolizing him to realizing he had feet of clay, which made him fully human, which made it so much easier to think about doing the story.
Yeah, and perspective does that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think yes.
Just going back to the Mitford Sisters and just thinking about your process, like such a involved book, so much research. And I was just thinking about, like, I was curious about, you mentioned a teeny bit talking to people related to their lives, so like where you traveled and like who you met, but also like how the pandemic maybe like played into your process and like maybe
Well,
shut down.
luckily in 2019, I was able to go to England and meet Jessica Mitford's son, Benji, who gave my friend and I a tour of Chatsworth House, which is spectacular, and then took us to Swinbrook, where the Cavendishes, Deborah Mitford's married name, the Duke and Duchess, own a pub and an inn near their original house, Astle Manor, and my friend and I were able to see Astle Manor and meet the current owner, who invited me to have a book event there if my British publisher would bring me over there. And that was great. But then the pandemic happened. Also, I was in touch with, the family owned an island in the Hebrides, Inch Kenneth, and I was in touch with the current owner, who grew up going there and now is like teaches at Cambridge economics or something, and she invited me to visit the island in March of 2020. So I never got to do that. But then
Right when everything locked down.
yeah, so I never got to go back. But the pandemic was very, very good to me and my husband in terms of like, perfect, now no one will interrupt us and we can get all this work done.
Are there any stories that you didn't get to put in the book that you wish you could have?
One was they had such interesting friends, really eccentric, funny friends, and their mother had a friend who was a widow, Mrs. Hammersley, who they called Mrs. Ham or the Wid, and she was always dressed in these widow's weeds, and she was like the original Debbie Downer, and Nancy actually became very good friends with her as an adult, and visited her and corresponded with her and would convey to the others that like the incredibly Debbie Downer things that Mrs. Wid had said today. So that she would have been an interesting one to have explored.
If you could have like expanded on the worlds that they operated in. The person who is flashing me the time cards, how much time do we have left?
Right now you have 8 minutes.
8 minutes? Okay, I thought we had to stop 10 minutes before. So we have time for more questions. If we have Ian again.
Yeah, I had a conversation earlier with the wonderful Justin Hall
Hi,
about
Justin.
color palettes. Can you speak more about what it was like only working with a single color throughout the entire thing?
Well, color is, I like working in color. I've worked in color in the past, but each panel requires so much concentration. Like what, you might have a palette to work with, but you're like, what color am I going to put in the foreground? What am I going to put in the back? There's a million decisions for every panel. So just the blue makes it so much simpler. The same thing was true of Over Easy. So, I mean, I could go on endlessly working in a single color, but I wouldn't mind actually working in color at some point.
Justin, you look like you might, did you want to ask a question? You look,
No, that was actually really great to hear. Would you consider working with another kind of thing to do a single color palette with another color? And if that would create
what's another color you would want to work with?
And if that would
Not
create an
red.
Not
emotional
red.
change.
I tried working in what I did a cartoon about about Lucille Ball, and I did it all in red, and I just wasn't somehow it didn't. I don't know. I mean, black and white would be great. A sepia tone.
Ooh, sepia, yeah.
Something like that.
You have a signing soon, and someone came in and let me know that I need to make sure you get to your signing at 4:30. Also, you should talk about your merch that you have.
Oh yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I have merch. I bought books, but I have Mitford Sisters coasters.
They're great.
$24. I had tea towels, but I sold out of the tea towels. Those tea towels are still available at mimipond.com. I have these pins. They're $10 each or $50 for the set. Also available at mimipond.com. And I have, and this relates to Over Easy, and the customer is always wrong. I have lion whore bags. I have this nice canvas pencil pencil
Temporary
pouch, and a velvet bag. You use it as an evening bag, just so everyone knows exactly who you are. And I have lion whore pins
As
and
I was trying to read what you said.
and
Yeah.
temporary tattoos, and a lion whore patch that's
Yeah.
got this big.
I have all of the lying horror items.
She got the lion whore fun pack.
I did. Okay, let's give a round of applause for our wonderful meeting.
Thank you so much.